I had gone down to the Jolly Roger Hotel on Smuggler's Island in search of good food, peace and quiet, and gentle English sunshine. And I had found violent death. Arlene Marshall, a femme fatale if ever there was one, had been brutally strangled on a deserted beach. There were two people who had very good reason to wish Arlene Marshall dead. Christine REDFERN, whose husband Patrick had been pursuing a passionate love affair with her, and Captain Marshall, Arlene's husband, who had seemed to turn a blind eye to what was going on. But were there other, less obvious motives for the murder? That was what, only a few hours after the body had been discovered, my old friend Colonel Weston, assisted by Inspector Colgate and, of course, myself, had to investigate. There are better reasons than that for leaving Mrs. Redfern out of it. Apart from anything else, her hands are too small and delicate.
I suppose the Redferns ought to be our next priority. Which of them should we start with?
With the husband, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Before he has had too much time to recover from the shock.
I met her at a cocktail party about 3 months ago.
Captain Marshall has implied that until you both met down here, you did not know each other well. Is that so, Mr. Redfern?
Well, not exactly. As a matter of fact, I saw a fair amount of her one way or another.
Without Captain Marshall's knowledge?
I don't know whether he knew about it or not.
And was it also without your wife's knowledge, Mr. Redfern?
I believe that I mentioned to my wife I had met the famous Arlena Stewart.
But she did not know how frequently you were seeing her.
Probably not.
Did you and Mrs. Marshall arrange to meet down here?
I don't think there's much point in my trying to conceal anything from you. Arlena wanted me to come down here. I didn't really think it was a good idea with my wife and Marshall being here. But I suspect it was an added excitement as far as she was concerned. In the end, well, I would have agreed to do any mortal thing she asked me to. She had that kind of effect on people.
The eternal Circe.
She certainly could turn men into swine. I was completely infatuated with her. Whether she cared for me or not, I simply don't know. She pretended to, but I think she was one of those women who lose interest in a man once they've got him body and soul. She knew she'd got me all right. When I saw her lying there, dead on the beach this morning, it was like being hit by a bolt of lightning.
And now?
How much of this has got to be made public? It's not as though it could have any bearing on her death, and if it all comes out, it's going to be pretty rough on my wife.
And that concerns you, does it?
I realize you must think I haven't given her much thought up to now, but the real truth is that I care for my wife very deeply. Arlene was a kind of madness, the sort of damn fool thing that men do. But Christine is different. She's real. Badly though I've treated her, I've known all along that she was the person who really counted. I wish I could make you believe that.
But I do believe it, Monsieur Redfern. Oh, yes. I believe it.
Thank you, Monsieur Poirot.
If your infatuation for Mrs. Marshall played no part in the murder, then there will be no point in dragging it into the open. But what you don't seem to realize is that your intimacy with Mrs. Marshall may have a very direct bearing on the murder. It might establish a motive for the crime.
I don't follow you.
Supposing that Captain Marshall had found out about your affair with his wife.
You mean he might have killed her?
It had not occurred to you?
Never. Marshall's such a quiet kind of chap. It doesn't seem likely.
What was the attitude of Arlene Marshall toward this? Was she frightened that her husband might find out, or did she not care?
There were times when she seemed a bit nervous about it all.
Did she seem afraid of him?
No, I wouldn't say that.
And was there at any time a question of divorce?
Oh, no. I would never have done that to Christine, and I'm sure Arlena never thought of such a thing. She was perfectly satisfied with the husband she'd got. I was just one of a succession of poor mutts. Just something to pass the time with. I knew that all along, but it didn't alter my feelings towards her.
Now, Mr. Redfern, did you have a particular appointment with Mrs. Marshall this morning?
No, not a particular appointment exactly. We usually met every morning on the beach. We'd swim or paddle about on floats.
Were you surprised not to find her there?
Yes, I was. I couldn't understand it at all.
If she were keeping an appointment somewhere else, do you have any idea with whom that might be?
No idea.
And when you had a rendezvous with Mrs. Marshall, where did you go?
Sometimes in the afternoon we'd meet at Gull Cove. The sun is off there at that time, so you don't usually get many people there.
Did you ever meet at the other place, Pixie Cove?
No, you see, Pixie Cove faces west, and people go around there in boats or on floats in the afternoon.
And your private rendezvous, they were always in the afternoon?
Yes. That's the time when most people go and have a sleep or mooch about and nobody knows much where anyone is. After dinner, of course, we used to go off on a stroll together.
Ah, yes.
Then you can give us no help whatsoever as to why Mrs. Marshall should have gone off to Pixie Cove this morning.
I haven't the faintest idea. It wasn't like our Lena at all.
Can you think of anyone in her London circle who might have had a grudge against her? Someone you may have supplanted in her affection, perhaps?
I honestly can't think of anyone.
So, we seem to be left with three possibilities. An unknown killer, some maniac who just happened to be in the vicinity. And that's a pretty tall order.
But isn't it the most likely explanation?
Pixie Cove is practically inaccessible. You can only get at it by boat or by walking over the causeway, crossing the island by the hotel, and climbing down a rickety ladder. Neither way suggests a killing on the spur of the moment.
You said there were three possibilities.
There were two people on the island who had a very good reason for killing her. Her husband for one, and your wife for another.
My wife? Oh, but that's ridiculous. She's not that kind of person. There's no violence in her. Anyway, Arlena was much stronger than Christine. I doubt whether she could strangle a kitten, let alone a woman like Arlena. Oh, Christine could never have got down that ladder. She's no head for heights at all. No. No. She couldn't have done it.
Didn't think it necessary to tell the fellow his wife had got an alibi. Shook him up a bit, didn't it?
The arguments he advanced were as strong as any alibi.
Oh, she couldn't have done it.
Patrick said you wanted to have a word with me.
Oh, yes, Mrs. Redfern. Come in. Sit down, please.
Thank you.
You know Monsieur Poirot, of course.
Of course.
We're asking everyone to account for their movements this morning. Pure routine, you understand.
Where do you want me to begin?
As early as possible, madame. What did you do when you got up this morning?
On my way to breakfast, I went into Linda Marshall's room. She wasn't there, but I met her in the corridor. I asked her if she'd like to come with me to Gull Cove.
At what time was this?
About 8:30.
And where had Miss Marshall been?
She said she had been swimming.
And what time did you set out for Gull Cove?
I think it was just on 10:30.
And what did you do at Gull Cove?
I did a few sketches, and Linda sunbathed.
And what time did you leave the cove?
At 11:45. I had a tennis match and had to change.
You had your watch with you?
No, I had to ask Linda what the time was.
I see.
And then I packed up my sketching things and went back to the hotel.
And Mademoiselle Linda?
Linda went and had a swim.
Now, did Linda Marshall actually enter the water before you left the beach?
Yes. She ran down to the sea as I was fastening my box. She was splashing about in the waves as I was on the path up the cliff.
You are quite sure of that, madame? That she really entered the sea?
Oh, yes.
Go on, Mrs. Redfern.
I went back to the hotel, changed and went to the tennis court where I met the others. We played for about an hour and were just going back into the hotel when we heard about Mrs. Marshall.
And what did you think, madame, when you heard the news?
What did I think?
Yes.
It was a horrible thing to happen.
Ah, yes. Your fastidiousness was revolted, I understand that. But what did it mean to you personally? Were you really surprised by the manner of her death?
I think I see what you mean. No, I was not surprised. Shocked, yes. But she was the kind of woman...
She was the kind of woman to whom such a thing might happen. Yes, madame. That is the truest and most significant thing that has been said in this room. Now, leaving all personal feeling aside, What did you really think of Mrs. Marshall?
Is it really worthwhile going into all this now?
I think it might be, yes.
She's the kind of woman that's absolutely worthless as far as I'm concerned. She had no mind. She thought of nothing but men and clothes. She was a useless parasite. She was the sort of woman who could be mixed up in everything sordid. Blackmail, jealousy, violence, every kind of crude emotion. She appealed to the worst in people.
Mrs. Redfern, why did you mention blackmail?
Because she was being blackmailed.
And how can you be certain of that?
I happened to overhear something. You remember, Monsieur Poirot, that night we were playing bridge. My husband and I, you and Miss Darnley. I was dummy. It was very stuffy in the card room, and I went down to the beach for a breath of fresh air. Suddenly I heard voices. Mrs. Marshall was saying something like, "It's no good. I can't get any more money now. My husband will suspect something." And a man's voice said, "I'm not taking any excuses, Mrs. Marshall."
And do you know who the man was?
He was keeping his voice very low. It could have been anybody.
Now we're getting somewhere.
But I am not certain where. It is not a wicked blackmailer who lies dead. It is the victim. And blackmailers are not in the habit of killing off their victims.
Well, I can't deny that. But it does suggest a reason for Mrs. Marshall's going off to Pixie Cove by herself. She was meeting the fellow who was blackmailing her.
Pixie Cove would certainly be the ideal place for such a rendezvous. It is difficult of access, and it is deserted in the morning. And it has another advantage. I heard about it the other day. There is a cave there. A place where someone could wait, unseen.
Well, we'd better take a look inside it.